Good morning. This is the 7th episode of FAFO and Chill, in which the Chainstack Developer Experience team talks about the various things that we've been building and exploring in Web3 over the past few weeks. In classic Web3 fashion, we spend a lot of time exploring new Web3 technologies and building various tools. FAFO and Chill is where we talk about these things and dive into the world of Web3 tech. Today in specific, we're going to be having a kind of interesting discussion that hits close to what I've been doing over the past few weeks. And every week is something new, and it's a new concept and a new focus and stuff like that. But specifically this week and last week in particular has been a big focus on RPC node performance. And of course, as an infrastructure provider, this is a big thing for us, right? Trying to find ways to improve performance, to address performance as a whole for the industry, because this is one of the most important components of using dApps, right? It's the performance of an RPC node. It's one of the most important components of actually developing and reducing friction in development, and we'll get into it, but this is a very large and important concept, so we're going to be talking a little bit about that today. But before we jump into it, as usual, we have kind of our three main speakers here. Number one is me. My name is Ethan. I go by the alias Tabasco online. I am the developer relations lead here at Chainstack. With me, I have Ake, our director of developer experience, as well as David, our developer advocates lead. So what's up, guys? How you guys doing?
Do you actually like Tabasco? I don't remember asking this question, but maybe I did. Do you like spicy food? I always wanted to ask.
Don't like Tabasco at all, actually.
You don't?
I don't mind spicy food if it's good, but Tabasco is definitely not my... I don't think I would ever voluntarily put Tabasco on any of my food.
Oh, really? Okay. I eat a lot of Tabasco. I just,
me too. I like it a lot.
Yeah. Okay. I'm getting the spiciest one that's available here in Singapore.
Jesus.
Scorpio. Did you guys try Scorpio?
I haven't. I've tried the lime. Yeah. I tried the base and the lime, and that was it.
Over there,
lime is
it's
very
so
mild.
spicy.
But anyway, okay. So what's the Tabasco background then?
It was interesting, and I wish there was a more exciting story attached to it, but it's just so first of all, I really dislike, I don't mind spicy foods. Like I'll eat it if it's a little bit spicy or mild, but typically something as much as Tabasco, especially just in the flavor that it has, is not for me. But the name originally came from the fact that a few years ago I was huge into video games, and specifically like Overwatch, if anybody is familiar with that. That was kind of my game. I played it all the time. I wanted to actually play competitively. So I played it all the time, but I couldn't. I played it all the time like on my brother's computer and on my friend's account, but I couldn't afford a copy of Overwatch. It was like $30 or something, and I didn't have the money for it. So I was like, well, I want to play Overwatch, but I don't have an account. So I borrowed my friend's account. I borrowed his name. It was Battle.net was the client for Overwatch, and his name was Tabasco in all caps, and I don't know why that was his name.
Okay.
I have no idea, but that was what I used. And then as I got into competitive Overwatch, and I did pretty well. I don't remember what rank I got up to, but it was a big thing for me, and I streamed everything. And eventually, everybody just called me Tabasco, and that was just what people called me by. So I was like, well, I guess this is what I'm running with now, and that's ever since I started in Web3, I just stuck with Tabasco, and that's what I use it for.
It's a good one because I'm older. I don't know if it exists these days, but 2000. I want to say at least you didn't get the names that used to be popular, like XXX, Slayer, 420 XXS, something like this. These used to be really popular in gaming, accounts. So Tabasco is a good.
Yeah,
anyway,
I used to play Minecraft, and I never got into Call of Duty. I think I was born at just the wrong time for like Black Ops 2 or Zombies or anything like that. I was like at the tail end of Minecraft and kind of all that stuff. But I was at the very end of I think it was like the MLG era of gaming with the X's and the zeros and the underscores and the terms that everybody used. But yeah, that was good.
You're actually a very good representation, I think, because I feel like the last bull run we got a lot of people from gaming. It certainly feels like it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big vertical within Web3. There's a lot of traditional gaming people. We actually I'm not sure if they are still, if their project is still going. And I know we're kind of deviating off of the central topic here, but I'm not sure if their project is still going, but I don't remember the name of it now. But the point of the project was that it detected rug pulls before they happen, which is kind of cool. And I like this concept. I thought this was a good idea. So this guy that made it, I think he was, if I remember correctly, either he worked at Call of Duty or he was like one of the main guys that did the whole like early gaming scene over there. Maybe it was FaZe or something like that. But we had calls with him and talked to him a bunch, and he came directly from that community, from like the gaming space, like that whole area over to Web3. I guess the culture must be similar, so it's like easy to on-ramp or something, because it is very much like that kind of niche internet culture that I think like old era gaming kind of shares with Web3. It's very similar in that sense.
Yeah, I think Kava guys, KAVA, who is also our partner, I think they also came from gaming. I think like 3 years ago. I was looking into them, and their CEO. So I think he was from some, like Call of Duty or Black Ops or whatever. Sorry, who do you guys think is going to be the next wave of what the next bull run? Who is going to be the guys? Because so it was like looking at the past bull run. So we had like anarchy type of guys, crypto anarchy. Before crypto was even called crypto. What was the name of the team? I forget. But anyway, then we had like a little bit on the technology side of people. Then we got the gamers. Who are we going to get the next bull run? Are we going to get the like uptight suits, like institutional guys, like Mr. Bernstein, type of like, I think VCs already milked it. I think VCs are on the crazy side as well, because what happened last bull run, I think it wasn't very different from from the stuff happening in the Silicon Valley. So VCs already, had their way with crypto. Maybe we're going to get institutional guys. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think it will be. I think like traditional finance for some reason has been like, I don't know what changed, but all of a sudden it was like just recently in this quarter, really, like in quarter 3, just like last month, it was like all of a sudden like we're into crypto now. It was BlackRock submitted their ETF.
Oh yeah, BlackRock.
That was huge. I mean, and then you see like what is the BlackRock CEO or whatever, he's like all over crypto now. Like if you watch the clips, he's like, Bitcoin is this revolutionary asset and this digital gold and this and that. And I think traditional finance is starting to realize, which is interesting because I feel like crypto is really contrary to a lot of the core beliefs of traditional finance. But which is odd that BlackRock of all people would like be, I guess maybe they want control over it or they want to like be the facilitators of it. But still, I think definitely in this next war, we're going to see a lot of traditional finance coming into this space, and a lot of maybe not VCs as much, but just like, I guess is maybe the term's old money, if that makes sense. Like people that, have been apprehensive about crypto up to this point, and just like, I think now that regulation is less, and kind of BlackRock and those major institutions are starting to kind of signal to everybody like, oh, this is something that's real, this is okay. I think that'll probably be the next wave, but who knows? I'm not too sure.
No.
I was wondering about this as well. Just today on my work, on my way to work, BTC and BlackRock, how like BTC doesn't have inflation, right? It's not an inflationary asset, which is, as you said, which is like the opposite thing of what the TradFi does, right? How are you going even to run the economy with a method that's deflationary?
Right.
I don't know. But it's interesting to see. It's interesting.
It is interesting. I think I don't know. I mean, this conversation could kind of go into a rabbit hole, but I think in general, the idea that traditional finance is getting into it might be because maybe they realize that it's like something that is just going to happen. Like crypto is going to be a wave that people are going to start using it. So it's like better to get in now and have some level of kind of influence rather than like being 10 years late. I mean, they're already a little bit late. But maybe that's a motivation behind it. I don't know.
It
because
is true. Yeah.
Crypto, and this is why I thought always like banks would never be, or even like just large financial institutions would never be on board with Web3, is because at the core of Web3 is it's like opposition to centralized institutions and kind of that sort of part of finance. It's like decentralization and self-custody, and like the principles of Web3 are extremely contradictory to all of that. But maybe the two, maybe there's a place for both to exist simultaneously. Who knows?
Yeah.
But this is interesting.
For sure.
So, the main topic that I wanted to touch on today, to kind of wrap back around to that, was RPC node performance. So very different than traditional finance and this whole conversation. But in a way, it ties into it because right now, and I saw Nader. So if you guys are familiar with Nader, I believe he's a director of developer relations at Lens right now, or Aave or something like that. And he posted a tweet not too long ago where he basically said, like, he was tired of infrastructure companies. He wanted to see less infrastructure in the space. He didn't want any more infra. But which kind of ties into this conversation of like infrastructure and its importance, because I think we mentioned this last time, or at some point in one of the past few podcasts, but like Web3 infrastructure at its core is extremely foundational to everything, right? So like you can't expect to build like a good consumer app if the infrastructure that you're using is 300 milliseconds response time, or isn't scalable, or costs $100,000 a month. I mean, there are just core components of just like we're just talking about like foundational infrastructure, so RPCs, subgraphs, etc. But you also have like more than that, right? You also have infrastructure like on the blockchain side of things, right? You have people creating SDKs and APIs, and all these things add up to the point of like enabling use cases. And then I think expecting people to say, and actually he followed up with his tweet today, and he said, he because he works for Lens, which is in some way sort of like an infrastructure for people creating on Lens, and it's like
absolutely
all stack
infrastructure,
of,
right?
And
even Lens is like on top of infrastructure, right? It's such a weird statement, but yeah.
I think he conceded a little bit and said that most of the people that are asking for consumer apps are the people that are working on infrastructure. And I mean, of course, like people that are working on that sort of infrastructure, of course they want consumer apps and things that face consumers because it uses their infrastructure, right? But I think as an industry, we need like just everybody, not just like there's not going to be one company that does this or 5 companies that do it. I think as an industry, the infrastructure needs to get better at a point where it's like performance is better, scalability is better, direction is better, right? So like things that actually make sense. Right now, if you want to find, like the video that I made the other day was PancakeSwap pair indexing. So like finding the most recent pairs created by the PancakeSwap factory contract. So if you want to find this, you have a million options. You can do it manually with RPC calls. You can listen to emissions. You can use an archive node. You can, to find recent states, you can send up a subgraph and do it that way. You can index and kind of call back at the past and look at all that stuff. You can use a data API, and I'm sure if you look and you can find 10 other niche ways of doing that. So it's like we need to streamline it. It needs to be more understandable, more easier to do. And then once the infrastructure is there, like if you look at Web 2, like can you imagine a TikTok or a YouTube if it took, if we were still on dial-up? I mean, it would be physically impossible to create these like huge consumer applications.
Of course.
Because the infrastructure doesn't exist. So I see a very similar thing with Web3, and I think that we have to take that approach to it where it's like you have to have, 4G, 3G, 5G internet before you can have your TikTok, if that makes sense. I mean, it's the same idea with Web3 in that you need to have that kind of fast and scalable infrastructure before you can create applications that you are expecting to be consumer focused. So that was kind of the big thing, and specifically on that side of things, like RPC latency has been a big question. So to kind of pivot slightly, right. I was on the
but let me just interject like a quick one.
Sure.
Because I want more infra. Well, first of all, there is on-chain infra and off-chain infra, right? Infrastructure, on-chain and off-chain. And I want more of both, right? Like for on-chain infrastructure, we have, there is a ton, but just to illustrate what I mean is we have Uniswap, we have Chainlink, we have Layer 0, we have other types of bridges and everything. And all of this on-chain infrastructure supports a lot of things happening, right, in Web3. And all of this on-chain infrastructure, like a lot of it is running on the off-chain infrastructure as well, like Chainstack and and subgraphs and APFS and all this stuff. And all of this infrastructure, I really want more of it, right? I want more of it. I want it better. It's like you mentioned, similar to TikTok or YouTube. YouTube is always like I'm noticing little things that YouTube is always releasing new ones. Like you can clip this, you can clip that. We're recording this on Riverside, by the way, which is also part of infrastructure Web 2. It's a tool similar to Web3, and all of this is all of this. What it does is just allows people to be more creative. It eliminates a lot of obstacles, and it is just you have a lot more. What's the word I'm looking for? You have a lot of more kind of fuel in your gas tank to be spending on the creative things and to be delivered to people faster. Instead of just faffing around in latency and all of the stuff. And if it's your thing, you can be doing that as well. I mean, it more. So bottom line, more infra on chain and off chain gives you more freedom to express yourself or to do useful stuff, right? So I really want more of it. More infra. So
yeah, that's the way to go. You need the pickaxe before you can actually mine anything.
And one more, infra does not really infrastructure. None of the infrastructure solutions. Just to make this point very, very clear, none of the infrastructure solutions centralize Web3. None of them do. All they do is make 3 more accessible, freer for people. Better for people, cheaper as well, because competition, is good for the end user always, and the end user in this case is developers, and then end user as well, consumers, and the decentralized, all these networks are validated. There is validators, there is everything. None of these chains, none of this stuff, none of this permissionlessness is going anywhere. Trustlessness. Is staying there. None like QuickNode, Alchemy, Chainstack. Just to be very, very clear, they are not centralizing anything. All they are doing is making people, is just driving adoption forward. That's what we are doing. And a contract, you deploy a contract on Ethereum, it's not going anywhere, right? It's not going anywhere. So more info, more adoption, better stuff. Better everything, right? Yeah,
definitely. I think there's definitely, like you mentioned, a misconception that like using a centralized RPC provider means that you're not decentralized. That you're not. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're using Chainstack or if you're using, your own node that you have sitting right beside your desk. I mean, both of these things are going to get you to the same end solution, which is the reason why we're building all these things in the first place, is because Web3 and decentralized technologies have unique benefits, like you mentioned. I mean, decentralization, trustlessness, being able to, everything that you can think about, right? Being able to transfer money over borders, and there's just no centralized institution. I mean, none of this stops, right, with the usage of an RPC provider or with, using the Graph's hosted service for your subgraph. I mean, all these things are just easier means to an end of using infrastructure that makes it easier to actually create applications. And making it easier to create applications, right, reducing that friction is what brings these consumer applications in the first place, right? So if everybody says, we want consumer apps, we want more people in the space, yeah, of course we do, because that drives adoption, that is everything that we're working for. But to get there needs to be streamlined processes of everything, of building, right? I wrote a whole thread on this not too long ago where I talked about the ways in which we'll reach mass adoption, and I'm of the belief that the way that we do this is it starts at the top, right? It starts with infrastructure that goes down into developers. Once developers have the infrastructure that they need, now they need to actually produce the applications. Those applications that they produce need to then be distributed by marketing and all these different roles that are in Web3, those are distributed. Those are now onboarding general people, and now you have just like this tower of things that need to be done before you have the end goal, which is, oh, we want the next billion users, right? Like these buzzwords everybody uses, right? But getting there isn't as straightforward as, I'm going to airdrop my NFT, or I'm going to create like a nice profile picture or something like that. It's an extremely complicated process that requires a lot of nuance, especially, and most importantly, usually, in the infrastructure space. You need infrastructure. You need that to get to where you need to go. I think it's number one priority before anything else, right? Once you have the infrastructure, then you need the developers, because you need the developer to actually leverage the infrastructure. And then you have applications, and the applications serve the mainstream. So this is at the core of it. And this is my belief of how we get there. And it starts with things like affordable RPC nodes, like fast RPC nodes, performant RPC nodes. But I guess before I kind of dive too deep into that and start talking about a story that happened the other day, David, I want to also understand your take on this in general as well. Do you think that there's too much of a focus on infrastructure? Do you think that we need to start focusing more on like infrastructure that specifically enables certain cases? I mean, I don't know. What are your general thoughts on kind of this conversation in general?
Well, as you guys were saying, infrastructure is kind of needed, because imagine you have to try to run your own nodes before building an application. That's gonna take too many resources. I feel like a focus for better onboarding users would be good, because it's really complex to do anything right now. There was this, what is this last app that came out, Worldcoin app, DApp token, Worldcoin.
I was wondering if anyone was going to mention Worldcoin today.
Let's talk about Worldcoin.
Just for history, for today's July 26th, at least for me. You guys is
so
July
Worldcoin was actually officially launched
2023.
Yesterday?
I think, yeah.
So stuff like that are sure, it's kind of controversial with like the kind of data they take and whatever. Full disclosure, I am fully fully into Worldcoin, in the sense that I signed up with them because when I went to ETH Latam at the time in August last year, they were there. I talked to the guys working there. They scanned me. I am in Worldcoin. I have my world ID and stuff. They had the orb there. I mean, there are the usual, controversial privacy type of thing. I feel like this is way less invasive than literally anything else that we have around. Because I don't think how they explain me that they don't really scan. I mean, that's what they told me, but who knows? But they don't really scan like, I don't know. They don't have a way to really associate who you are to the scans, and everything is done in a sort of like a zero knowledge type of situation. At least that was my understanding at the time. But anyway. Stuff like this, in theory, should help onboarding more students. Account abstraction is getting big on that. That it should make these things easier. This is going to bring another problem now. Did you notice how whenever you try to sign up for a platform, now you do sign up or log in, and you have sign up with Google, sign up with GitHub, sign up with Facebook, sign up with MetaMask, sign up with 10 different other platforms. So that's going to bring another redundancy, another complexity there. But overall, yes, I feel like everything, all this infrastructure that we're talking about, it needs to be abstracted in the back end, that nobody sees it. Otherwise, it's just too much. Like I've been in full-time working in this space for more than a year, and sometimes I still try to sign up for a decentralized platform, and I'm like, I'm not gonna do all this stuff. I'm not gonna go through this 10 steps and get this NFT and then get these tokens there and try to remember which wallet I used. Like it's,
of course,
yeah.
I mean,
if you want
to be like this decentralization freak, kind of, be my friend, right? Go right, handwrite bytecode, right? Push it onto a node, and then let your end users, your users, interact with the contract by manually constructing those transactions. Don't use MetaMask, right? MetaMask is centralization in your world, right? I mean, it's just craziness. And then and then you're using a fully centralized laptop as well, right? It's one instance. I mean, it can just go crazy. More infra. Yeah.
It's funny because I was talking to Ethan just before we started recording it, and he was like, "Hey, my browser is using so much RAM," and I'm like, "Oh, I used to have the same issue with 4, 5, 6 different wallets for different chains." And I said something like, "Oh, now I just use MetaMask for everything." And that reminded myself how I keep telling myself that I want to go away from MetaMask because it's so quote unquote centralized, but then I'm too lazy to do it. I'm used to the UI, I'm used to how everything works. There are some nice options out there that I don't feel like I want to spend time learning. It's really bad on my part.
For sure.
This is something that,
Yeah, it was the wallet pieces, and I probably do know. I think I was using Phantom, MetaMask. Let me actually check. I have my browser open right here. It was MetaMask, Phantom. There's a few others. I think I was using Backpack, a few other Solana-based ones, and there was even Soulflare. I think I had at some point. So it's there's I think in general, like you mentioned and like you identified correctly, it's wallets and the onboarding piece is also huge. And of course, wallets, I think also I count as infrastructure in some cases because it's just infrastructure of interaction. Using Web3 requires these mediums of interaction like wallets and whatnot. I think, we've said this a few times, but I do not envision a future in which people are creating a MetaMask wallet and writing down 12 words on a piece of paper. That seems way out. And maybe the future is. Now, okay.
Your patent is the future. When I was reading, Worldcoin was everywhere yesterday. I was thinking about your patent, which I think is a better way to do the stuff. You can have multiple accounts, right? You can be multiple people on the internet. That's the beauty of the Web2, Web3, Web whatever. You don't have to be one person. You can be multiple things, multiple identities, and they are all useful in their own ways. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, that was when I've been keeping up with Worldcoin for a while, and when I first saw it, I was like, it's interesting because, and David, maybe you can walk me through the way it works, because I've never actually done the whole identification process. But as far as I understand, I know we're kind of going a little bit off script here, but as far as I understand, Worldcoin, the whole iris thing is used as a way of identifying that you're a human. So it's not necessarily as you use your iris as a method of authentication. It doesn't link to your wallet as much as it does tell their system that you are an actual human being. Is that correct, or am I off?
It should be something similar, as long as I remember. The scan that they make, and I'm not sure it scans the retina only. I believe it scans this whole upper part around the eyes, and it basically creates a hash that it says, hey, this hash is associated with a person, with an actual person. And then you can use their app. And then I don't know how, because you set up the app, and I don't really remember how that worked. But then whenever you use the app for something, for example, now you can use the app to get these grants that they have. They give you every week, you can claim a couple of Worldcoin tokens or something like that. And it verifies that you're a human, but it doesn't scan anything in your body. You don't have to show your face, just to say, okay, you are verified. So the app somewhere in there has the hash that says, okay, this hash is actually associated with a person. But then I think it, in the background works more or less like a regular externally owned wallet, I believe. Yeah, that was a while ago.
Yeah. You guys, quick interjection before I forget. You guys think this is really we're again? I think Web3 speeds running a lot of things, and in this particular case, I'm thinking it's the insane thing that Web1 and Web2 used to do. Because I'm older, when Web1, Web2 started. When Web1 existed, it was never give out your personal information on the internet, right? It was, you always use a nickname which is not associated with you, and everybody was just doing this. No, and then platformization started in Web 2, and everybody, wow, yeah, this is my real name. Facebook, here, please have my real name, and let me also tag all those people in there who also have real names, so that you have more data, which is like complete opposite. And and then now we have Web 3, where Web 3 is today, overwhelmingly is a lot of 0x's, right? 0x accounts or other accounts, not necessarily 0x, but and now with Worldcoin we are getting into one person per per account or whatever. Maybe similar things happening, right?
Shift back from.
Yeah.
Well, it was I guess you kind of mentioned it. It's kind of sort of like a ping pong. It's like start. Good.
Yeah, sorry, just one more thing. Or we are getting prepped by the guys for the institutional bull run. Maybe that is the thing. Now all those institutions, they are going to come now, and we have tons of people that used to be unbanked, right? We have a lot of.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have this huge market that we can finally tap into, and put all those people on 22% credit interest and whatever, just loan them out, and just totally mine them as a resource. I shouldn't be saying this, but it's just a weird idea. But it's kind of getting there. Maybe that's where we're getting into.
I mean, they for sure have the interest. Like you've been seeing the past couple of years that they keep applying for. Your big institution keep applying for starting ETFs and stuff like that about various cryptocurrencies. So the interest is definitely they are in institutions that want to make money, and this is a big market. So why wouldn't they be there?
Yeah, for sure. And kind of that's what we're talking about in the beginning a little bit. In that, I think definitely the institutional interest is starting to pick up. And like I said, it's sort of like a double-edged blade, because it's on one hand definitely there's like a huge money making opportunity, and there's like you mentioned, there's a big market of people there in Web3 and will be in Web3 that aren't currently tapped into by like traditional financial institutions. And then on top of this, I guess that's one component, right? They want to get in here because there's money to be made, but also there's like ideological differences, which is why at the same time it's like interesting to see BlackRock, for example, peddling the benefits of Bitcoin so much. It's like I forget what his name is, but he's been on all these interviews and he's been like, yeah, I love Bitcoin and it's so great for this and decentralized and that. Sounds like a crypto influencer. I mean, in the way that he's
exactly
it's trying Bitcoin. So it was interesting to see that happen and that mindset shift happen with traditional finance, and I think it's a good thing. I think that we'll see a lot more money coming into the space, and we'll see more people use it, and there's going to be, more people. There's going to be generally more accessibility on the enterprise level all the way down to the individual level, hopefully. But yeah, I think to kind of tie that back around to WorldCoin, I know we've totally deviated here.
Whatever.
I think it's fun. Yeah. I think WorldCoin is interesting because, that was something that I learned about a while ago, and I was actually talking to a few guys in Telegram, and I was like, why? To me, it doesn't make sense that out of any method of, because I guess the thing that I was making was taking a different approach to it. It wasn't necessarily identifying if somebody's human or not, but more so tying biometric features to wallets, right? But WorldCoin, they don't take that route, in that they do exclusively just come and scan your eye with this crazy piece of hardware, and that'll verify your authenticity as a human. But what's the difference between that and just walking up to a camera or somebody looking at you and saying, yeah, you're a human? Or I feel like all these things essentially achieve the same end goal here, which is just verification of humanity is cool, but biometrics in Web3 I think have a huge application beyond just this is a real person. Now we can mark their wallet as a verified human, and we can kind of take that different approach to it without having to do KYC or whatever, which is great. But I think biometrics in general can be used for a wider range of use cases. For example, the hash thing that you mentioned, David. This is actually in the patent that's currently pending, which took a million years. I finally got it. I corrected a bunch of stuff, and it's now with the patent office. But the way that works is it of course takes a picture of your face, and I'm actually thinking of, so the things that it stores a picture of your face. It stores permanently, so it can know, who you are. Basically, it can tie that directly to you. It ties it to a wallet, not a name. So, a picture of your face, and that's the one thing. It of course has the picture of your face labeled with a public key, and then it has an encrypted private key. This private key is encrypted with a phrase that is nobody knows. It's not stored anywhere. The key that encrypts the private key is completely unknown because it's directly derived from the unique print on your hand. So you can't decrypt this private key. You can't brute force it like practically, because each private key that's stored is encrypted directly with the I believe it's called the visual hash. It's like the hash that they're less like prone to small pixel based hash changes, but the visual hash of your print, your palm print in this case.
Right.
So it's an interesting way because it allows you to, like in this case, I was even considering to reduce reliance on centralized systems, which is kind of ties into the subject here. Which originally, and the way that I did it with some of my past projects was just like, oh, you could just create a big database like on a centralized AWS server and just include everything there. But that seems very Web 2 and a little bit like elementary. So my idea was like, with these private keys, you could probably even throw them onto decentralized file storage as just metadata. You could throw it onto IPFS or something like that, and because they're encrypted with a phrase that isn't found anywhere, and it's this huge long hash that even just like if you shift, your hand in terms of slight iterations like that, it won't recognize it. So this is, it's an idea that I've had for a while, and I've created a few proof of concepts. But I think that's a direction that biometrics can go into. Just the general idea of like using it as authentication, right? So using it to actually send transactions instead of right now. The process is, create a MetaMask wallet, create a seed phrase, write it down, put it into your Fire safe, and now you create a transaction. You have to connect your wallet to an application, then you send the transaction, you send it. Versus the ulterior, which is you don't have to do any of that because your wallet is secured just by the fact that you have the assumption that you have uniquely identifiable biometric features, and it's protected by those biometric features, and then that's it, right? You just authenticate transactions by looking at a camera essentially and using your palm print if you need decryption.
Your patent is pretty cool. I'm just thinking right now, the stuff that you just said, it might even have more implementations in there. For example, it's a very stupid case, but it's one immediately springs in my head is you get people married, right? You get like newlyweds, and then they get a certain amount of funds gifted to them or whatever, and then you can use like two hands, one from each person, and then create a hash key, and you get like kind of sort of a multi-sig sort of thing, but it's just maybe one key generated from two hands, right? In this way, it's just you're not going to get these crazy crypto stories of where, hey guys, I use my all our waiting funds to invest into Worldcoin now. I'm afraid to tell my wife, right? And in this case, using Ethan's patent, you can just be have sort of a multi-sig where only two of you have access to this at the same time, right? That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was the general idea, just like trying to figure out a way to, because like of course you can't generate a private key necessarily. Like private keys need to be encrypted in some case. So like in some applications do it via password or whatever it may be, right? Or they just like don't even encrypt it. Or I mean, there's different ways of storing it. But I think in general, encrypting it with hashes that are derived from kind of unique places are usually, I mean, it's the same thing as just having like a super long password. Right, so if I wanted to encrypt my private key with a 32 character, SHA hash, then I could, and it would be pretty secure. But the difference is that instead of just like putting that into a text file somewhere, it's physically found on your hand or something, which is, I think an interesting way of doing it, and it's always with you and stuff like that. But it was just an idea, and seeing Worldcoin, seeing all this stuff pop up, it was, I see it all the time, and I'm like, I think people are starting to realize that this is like an opportunity. Biometrics in general are an opportunity in Web3 to kind of ease UX and make everything a little bit easier, because a big part of why Web3 is difficult to use is just, the this decentralization and everything is great, but like you don't know, of course, who's real is one thing, and then the usability is kind of an issue. So like the only way you can currently verify if somebody is real is through KYC. This is what Worldcoin set out to solve. I don't quite agree with their solution. I think that you could have come up with like an easier solution that it wasn't a big orb that you put your eyes into, but I think right now it's KYC, and KYC is a huge mess. I mean, I'm sure most of you guys have tried it. Like doing any sort of KYC is a major pain, and like, even with me, especially in the US, you have to like submit PDFs of your like your water bills and like proving that you live in a certain.
Yeah, same in Singapore.
It's ridiculous. So ridiculous. Proving that that individuality without having to do all that crazy stuff.
And right, I remember sorry, jumping in here. I remember the guy from Worldcoin was explaining me that was exactly their goal, because all this KYC is always a problem, and in theory with a system like this you wouldn't need to show your passport and stuff like that. A fun example, I have an account, now I live in Brazil, but I have a bank account in Italy, and obviously that's based on my Italian documents, and my passport is expired a couple months ago. Now I'm in the process of renewing, rather making a new one. And guess what happened? After 30 days that I couldn't provide a new passport, they blocked everything. I don't have access to the account in Italy. I don't have access to any card or anything. I moved all the money away. I left something like $50 in it. I moved all the money to the account here in Brazil, so at least I have access to that. But that's, that's the reality of banks. Like, oh, sorry, you were good until yesterday, but now your piece of paper expired, so you don't exist anymore. It's like it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, this is a very good example. So Worldcoin and all this other stuff in Web3 is infrastructure, where none of it, like if I don't know how Worldcoin works, but for example, you get identified as a person, and then you stop staking Worldcoin or whatever. None of this is actually centralizing stuff. It is just helping helping Web3, because the underlying, like, you're not going to lose Ether because of this, right? Ethereum will not stop running. None of the blockchains stop running, and you won't lose access to the network ever, right? Unlike this thing that you just walked us through with the government, right? So that's important to remember for all people out there. Building infrastructure is not centralizing Web3. It's not, right? So
yeah.
It only helps to accelerate the space, and maybe Worldcoin will be kind of a solution to what we were talking about, in terms of it'll be that infrastructure that accelerates that part of Web3, in terms of like providing a way to verify these things and interact with financial institutions without a way that, like, it's ridiculous that on like even like your credit card or anything that you use, it all like, it expires in 2 years and then you can't use it anymore, and you have to go in a lot of cases, like in the US, like your driver's license, for example, right? I mean, this is crazy. It expires, and then you have to physically drive to somewhere and then turn it in and talk to somebody and then get it renewed, and it's all a whole deal, and get a picture taken. I mean, these are all things like, if you start thinking about everything, like, and I was actually talking to somebody recently about this, like titles, for example, right? So titles to cars or titles to houses. I just recently bought my first car not too long ago, and I went through the whole process of getting that title and going through the bank for that. And it's a huge pain, right? The bank is an intermediary. They hold the title. It's, they basically own the vehicle. And I mean, it's not a fun situation. And you're trusting the bank, right? You're trusting that, they hold the title and they own the car, but I'm just using it until I pay it off. And, now you have to mail this physical piece of paper that says that you own this thing to this other place, and now they own it. It's such like an archaic way of doing things. And you just start thinking about everything that we do every day, right? Yeah. Especially when it comes to like government stuff and all these different institutions and banks, and you start to realize, like, this makes no sense, or why are we doing it like this? And then the solution is usually as easy as just saying, like, well, that's a smart contract. You lock it up into a contract, and then once you pay off the balance, and now you own the title to this car, and that's it, right? Rather than like saying, oh, you have to take this big piece of paper that like looks all fancy and mail it to the bank, and then they hold it there and they're safe or whatever, and some file, and then they send it back to you once you've paid them your debt. And I mean, just everything. And that requires transport of the paper and like people and labor to deal with all that. So like the amount of inefficiency, if you just think about it in like modern systems, especially in like kind of the case that you mentioned, David, it's insane. And all this stuff can be solved by, in a lot of cases, infrastructure, like Web3 infrastructure. And these won't be things that like, in a lot of cases, like I know we all want consumer apps. We all want, we want a payment system and we want this and that. But at the end of the day, the things that I think will be really successful within Web3 will just be like, solving these issues in a way that like is super abstracted and like nobody knows that necessarily like Web3, like they're not opening MetaMask or anything. It's just solved and these things are being made more efficiently by Web3. But I don't know. What do you guys agree with that? You think that's abstraction is the way or what?
Yeah, that's how it's gonna have to be. And I've been trying to play with account abstraction recently. It's something that I want to start making some content on. I'm just struggling a little bit. One, finding the time. Two, some of the tools that are around for developers that are somewhat complex to make work or they don't work properly. So, it's the usual things. But this also cannot be the usual solution. I don't know if you guys saw, but when they talk about CBDCs, for example, someone was able to find somewhat of a draft or a very rough version of a smart contract for CBDCs in Brazil that were working from the government. And it comes out that this contract is a smart contract, right? So everything is secure. It comes out that from this smart contract, who operates it can freeze funds, can remove funds from people's wallet. This opens a whole other, open all a different kind of worm. This situation is not necessarily better than a bank because my bank can freeze my account, but who operates the CBDC can do the same. Can even withdraw the funds. Can just say, hey, this is not yours anymore. It's a fine line that we're walking, I guess.
Yeah, I saw that news story come out where they were. And this goes for everything in terms of like, you can have good usage of blockchain, good usage of dApps and smart contracts, but you can also do it into a way where you're just parroting like the issues, you're just reproducing the issues that exist within Web 2. You're introducing the same centralized reliance. Like you're just eliminating the whole point of using it, and it happens all the time with a bunch of different solutions to Web 3. Like people just don't understand that. Like I think the focus on decentralization and the focus on trustlessness specifically, like that's a huge component of it. Like you shouldn't have to trust people to do all these different things. Like these, there's so many things that can be made trustless. Like for example, that the smart contract that one institution can do whatever they want with, that's not trustless, right? So there's things that need to be made that way that aren't. And I think as people start to implement Web3 and as more banks start to use it, as some of these solutions that we just discussed start being built out, hopefully, and I think this will happen, but people will be kind of held to the fact that the solutions that are made need to be in line, not only with the technology, of course, because they'll be built on the technology, but they need to be in line with the philosophy of Web3, if that makes sense, right? Because like that's just important as a technology, right? You can use a technology in a way that's super contrary to the philosophy, but you can, at the same time, you can use it in line with the philosophy, which means creating things that are trustless, creating things that don't take advantage of kind of the systems at hand, and that use that philosophy, use that trustlessness, that decentralization, that being able to interact with these different things without having to either trust or go through intermediaries. These are all things that can be implemented or cannot be implemented into Web3 applications. So that's a big thing. But I guess to kind of wrap back around to that topic, it was all of this stuff is enabled by infrastructure. I think a lot of the use cases that we even just like 75% of what we just talked about is infrastructure at the end of the day, right? So like the notion that none of this stuff is important, like we should just stop with infrastructure, stop with creating these different solutions that people can build other solutions upon and that solve all these problems, right? We need to be focusing on like Starbucks Web3. That's like a consumer application, if that makes sense. Like those are great, and I think those will exist, and these things will definitely help in adoption. But infrastructure is such a huge vertical Web3, and it's important in so many areas. And like Ake said, it doesn't. It's the same misconception that I'm not too sure where the idea that like infrastructure is inherently bad came from to a lot of people. It's like, oh, we need to run our own nodes and we need to do everything decentralized. We need to not rely on any potentially centralized piece of infrastructure. Like at the end of the day, then you're gonna like I think you guys mentioned like the laptop. I mean, the laptop is a single centralized piece of infrastructure. I mean, the browser that you use is a centralized piece of infrastructure that you're using to interact. Everything at the end of the day relies on something that is not completely decentralized, across the blockchain, and that's not a bad thing, because the right balance of infrastructure that is maybe a little bit centralized, that relies on servers on AWS or Google Cloud, balancing that with applications that leverage what that enables, which is decentralization. That's where you get the true use cases. That's where you get applications that really shine to be unique and to be interesting. But I mean, I guess that's my main take on it. Do you guys have any kind of final thoughts there? And maybe I can start talking a little bit about the other main topic at hand.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's start talking about the main idea at the end.
Yeah, but we'll kind of wrap up with this. The main topic today was supposed to be about RPC node performance, which we definitely went off the rails with that a little bit. But the idea there was that over the past few weeks we've been talking about RPC nodes and specifically like ways to, and I think in a way this loops back around with what we're talking about, just like improving infrastructure. But like I was on the Ethereum Python Discord the other day, and I found there's a conversation that was happening, and this guy was like, I'm trying to do this big call. I'm trying to make these thousands of archive node calls, and it keeps timing out, and it's being super slow, and it like won't work. And I asked him, I was like, what provider are you using? And he said, I'm using Chainstack. And I was like, oh, okay, well, he's using Chainstack. So I got into a message with him, and we had a big discussion, and I posted a whole video about this actually, because I thought this was super interesting. And what he said, and I looked at all the code, and I figured out, well, this isn't an issue with Chainstack. This is an issue with Python. Python as a language is not built for what he was using or what he was doing. And essentially what he was doing was looping through thousands of different requests, thousands of archive requests that were looping through blocks. So I think he had something like 700, 800 blocks that he was looping through. And each one of those blocks, of those 800 blocks, he was using that as a parameter in a smart contract call that returned archive data. So this is what he was building. And when he was doing this in vanilla Python, right, he was like, why is the RPC node not working? And I was like, it's actually not the RPC node. It's the fact that Python moves through things sequentially. So when you say, oh, I want to loop through 100 digits on Python and print each one out, it'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and it's going to keep going until it's 100. Versus if you do this through the alternative, which is either you can do it parallel or you can do it concurrently, which is the video that I made, through concurrent processing. It will start the first task. While that task is processing, it'll start the next task, and it'll just kind of bounce off of each other in this way to where it's constantly processing something. And this, David, what were your numbers on that? I think you're making an article about that. Your numbers was like 2 minutes to 10 seconds difference between multi-threading.
It was a huge difference. Yeah.
Right. And it's crazy how much of a difference that makes. And just in terms of Python itself, what was the example? Was that the 500 blocks archival balance, David?
Yeah, it was. So the example is just that. Yep.
Right. It was the I think it was loop through 500 blocks, or it was loop through the last 500 blocks on Ethereum mainnet.
And query a balance from an account. Yeah.
Right. I used to do that because I was curious some time ago. I was building something as well, and it took me a long time too. I remember that, but of course I knew it wasn't Chainstack. Of course I knew it was it was Python sequential. Python being sequential. Right. But yeah, it's very interesting. Okay, so now walk me through this. Yeah, that's how do you multi-thread this? 2 minutes. Yeah, 2 minutes, 500 blocks. That makes sense. I would even say it's pretty fast though, because
it went down from 2 minutes to 10 seconds.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay.
It's pretty crazy. Yeah. So yeah.
Python is still probably not the best solution for this, right? But still, it's a crazy. Yeah,
but it's a crazy
reduction. Yeah, let's go.
But the cool thing is that Python allows you to access. It's not the most efficient way, but it allows you to access very low-level operations in your machine. So that's how you can do it, because a thread is basically the smaller operation that the processor can do, set in a very very dumb words. Right. And what Python somewhat allows you to do that, allows you to assign a specific operation to one of the processors. And so with multi-threading, you can use all the available processors. For example, in my machine, I have, I think, 16 cores. And so with 16 workers, it was using all of them, you know, instead of going synchronously, sending a request, waiting for the response from the node, send the next request. It sends a request, it skips the response from the node, then it sends another one right away, and then it just puts it back together at the end. And so it went from 140 seconds to 10 seconds, pretty crazy. And then you can also see the difference in how many workers you use. So, for example, Ethan's example that I started from was using 10 workers or 10 cores. And then I realized, oh, wait a moment, mine goes up to 16. And it gave me a big boost, because the one with 10, it was like 15 to 20 seconds. And then I used full 16 and was down to 10. Like a 93% reduction from the original usual thing. Pretty crazy. And so I watched a video from Ethan. I was like, why don't we talk more about this? We get so many queries from users and customers like, what can I do to make it more efficient and stuff? And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to write something about it, because it's interesting. It's something that it's useful. It can help customers use Chainstack better. So, and the cool thing is that Chainstack doesn't rate limit. So you also don't get into that. I don't want to talk about, what other providers do, but for example, I'm fairly sure that if I use this specific script that we made in one of the other providers, we're going to get rate limited pretty quick, because it sends a whole bunch of requests all at once, and Chainstack doesn't limit. So, for example, in that article I wrote, as long as you stay below around 3,000 requests per second, you shouldn't have any issue, because our nodes can handle that, and you don't get rate limited. With other providers, I didn't try. Now I'm curious. I'm gonna try. I want to see how quick we get rate limited, because when Ethan and I were running our benchmark using the tool that the PMs made with Dana, while testing other providers, we will get rate limited like in 5 seconds. It's like, oh, oops.
Yeah, they're pretty so the article isn't published yet, but for anyone listening to this at a later date, just go to docs.chainstack.com and query for multi-threading, and you'll find it. Just wanted to put it out there.
Yeah, I think we should be out soon, maybe end of this week.
Yeah,
next week,
it's just under review, so.
Oh, then we can put it in the description.
Yeah.
In the description. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it was interesting when we were doing the whole chain bench thing, which if anybody here listening doesn't know what it is, it's basically like a pretty cool software that we created not too long ago that goes through a bunch of different methods and basically just like hammers an RPC node as much as it can and sees what the highest request per second is and latency and all that stuff. It's a pretty cool tool, but when we were doing that, we figured out like other providers have extremely strict rate limits. Like it's crazy. Yeah. We'd run it for like 1 second, and it would hit the rate limit, and it would just completely disable the node. So like this specific case, this whole multi-threading case where we go from on Python specifically sequential, extremely slow. We want to loop through 500 blocks. It just goes one after the other and waits for the request, right? If each request is 50 milliseconds, and you can tell how that would add up continually until you just have this huge impractical length of time that it takes to do one operation. So that was one thing, but for a lot of other providers, if you tried to multi-thread it or multi-process it, you're going to hit rate limits, right? So like this case specifically, Chainstack is one of the very few providers in which this will actually work, and you're not going to get shut down immediately once you start doing it. So this is an important component of it. So when I was in the conversation with this guy, and for some reason this happens all the time, I start conversations with people and developers specifically, and we start talking, and then we start talking about a problem in their code, and then just today I was on an hour-and-a-half call with a guy that was making a pretty cool application. We're debugging his smart contract and his JavaScript, and it just kind of came up naturally, and we were talking about it. But anyways, the same situation happened with this guy that was trying to do all these smart contract calls, and he was doing all this, and it was super slow, and it was timing out because it was taking so long. And we talked for a long time, and I figured out, I was like, well, what if I multi-thread this? Because I'd done it in the past with a few other applications. With actually one of my first major projects was an asynchronous multi-threaded Python script for Web3 requests. And I did it, and then I was like, well, this speeds it up 10 times. I mean, this completely solves the problem. So that was super cool. And then, there's some other stuff that we're working with on that side of things. But I saw that and I was like, this is a cool topic. So I created a video. It was 6 minutes, I think, where I went through the whole script, how to create it, how you can get started and create a multi-threaded Python script. And then what I did actually is I created 3 scripts. So I made one for multi-threading. I made one for sequential, just vanilla Python. I also made one for JavaScript. And that was the interesting thing. It was comparing the sequential and the multi-threaded Python with JavaScript. And now JavaScript is, as far as I understand, truly a parallel language. So you can do, with JavaScript, for example, you can do an asynchronous function. Virtually everything when you're using with Web3.js, it's all asynchronous. So you do an asynchronous function, then you just do a promise at all, right? A promise at all, you throw in all your methods and everything. And with JavaScript, I think it was something like 3 seconds to do all 500 requests, or it was 200 requests in the video. I was doing it, the video I cut it down to reduce the amount of requests I was sending. It was 200 requests to like 3 seconds to do that, or 2 seconds or something like that. And then in the multi-threaded Python script, it was I'd say maybe 6 seconds or 5 seconds. Then in the sequential Python script, it was like 15 seconds. Now, of course, this will scale depending on the latency, and this is probably one of the biggest determinators. Is that, especially with the sequential piece, is that if your node is taking 300 milliseconds to get back to you, then it's going to take significantly more time than if it's 10 milliseconds or 20 milliseconds, which actually wraps back around to what I did last night. And that, last night I'd been planning to do this for a long time, but I have this application that I built out in 2021, which seems like a million years ago at this point. But I built it out back then to measure the latency of RPC nodes on a web app. And originally what it did is it just, the first application was a server side. You throw in an endpoint, it runs a latency test on the server, and it returns a number. That was it. I didn't know anything about front-end engineering. There was no ChatGPT, so it looked very basic. That was all. It was a text box, you click enter, and it does it. And what I changed is that, I did a whole revamp. Over the years, I kind of changed it around a few times. And then last night, I did another revamp to where it runs these tests locally. So latency tests, when you're, especially if you're already on a asynchronous language like JavaScript, then beyond just like the actual way in which it processes things, the number one impact will be latency, right? This is just huge for everything. And of course, we've actually released technology specifically addressing latency across different locations like global elastic nodes and whatnot. But that application was built for the purpose of basically saying, and this is the revamp was for this. It was, you're located in the United States, or you're located in Brazil or something like that, right? And then it says, okay, well, here's throwing an endpoint, and it makes 50 balance requests to this node from your computer, from your client, your browser, and then it averages that latency out. It even tells you things like the cloud provider that the endpoint's using. It tells you the location of the endpoint, so where it's located at geographically. It tells you what chain it's on. It tells you the block number that it's currently on. It tells you if it's archive compatible, if it's debug trace compatible. I mean, all these things, which is pretty cool. But that was the general idea behind that. It was like latency is so important, and there's a lot of people, they'll get stuck with using an RPC node that is 100 milliseconds, and they're like, why is my application so slow? Why won't it work? And it's like, well, you need to deploy something that's closer to you, or you need to deploy a global elastic node or something. And I'm actually planning on doing a thread about this on Friday. But with latency, the number one thing is geolocation. Of course, like, you can configure your node to reduce latency and make it more performant, make it more responsive, but it almost is always like, are you in India and trying to query a node in Ashburn, right? If you are, then it's going to be pretty slow. It's going to, of course, be 100 milliseconds, 200 milliseconds. Mm-hmm. Are you, in Colorado trying to query that same node, then it's going to be pretty fast, and you're not going to have any problems with that. Or do you want a global elastic node, which is one of our another recent offerings, where it queries it wherever you are depending on your location. So it'll say if you're in India, it'll query whatever node is closest to you. It'll like find that server and say, this is the closest one. We'll query that, and that reduces latency, makes it less volatile. Anyways, it's a whole conversation, but that was kind of the big thing over the past few weeks was RPC node latency is trying to reduce it. With Python, the way that you can just not even worry about latency, assuming that you already have like a decently low latency, is with multi-threading, multiprocessing, concurrency specifically on Python. And then, of course, to kind of go with that whole performance bit, I did the revamp of the website, if anyone's interested, is node lookup, N-O-D-E lookup, .ethanfrancis.app. So it was a pretty cool web app that I built a while ago. Worth checking out if you're interested in that. Yeah, I mean, any thoughts on that kind of general topic, guys?
Yeah, that's always a full topic. There are so many nuances to that. But linking to that, one of the things that I'm planning to work more on content coming from Chainstack is exactly stuff like that. Now I've been saying this for a while, and I have to try to put it together in this next couple months. But I want to have some comprehensive guides where we can show you, okay, you're trying to run this kind of app, then you might want to use this kind of node setup and stuff like that. It's something that has been going on in my head for a while. Just have to find the time to put it together.
Right. Yeah, and in pieces like this, I mean, having the global ASIC endpoint or being able to deploy nodes in different locations is exactly the piece of infrastructure that you want to have to faff around a bit and be able to put together to even kind of not be limited as much by your physical location, physical access to different things, so that you can better serve your end users, right?
Yeah.
So there is always a way to improve, and you can only do that again using existing infrastructure.
And by the way, on this side note, I just tried this multi-thread script that we have in that article with one of the other node providers, and got rate limited in the middle of it.
Okay.
Something that doesn't happen with Chainstack. Just saying. I didn't get rate limited with Chainstack, but I did with the other provider.
You're pretty quick, David. That's nice.
It's right here.
That's the important part. Infrastructure is important, but what's more important than infrastructure is good infrastructure that doesn't rate limit you and charge you double the amount at the same time. This is a big part of what we do is no rate limits, and you save money, and you get more services and all that stuff. And the reason why we have such an importance on this, as we kind of wrap it up here, is because of kind of what we talked about today, and that at Chainstack we truly do believe in the importance of infrastructure and the role that it'll play, and specifically in empowering people that are making applications, whether it's more infrastructure that they're making or whether it's consumer-facing applications or whatever. Right? These are all things that we're super excited about, and that we are actively every day trying to improve the access to these different things, right? Through global elastic nodes to reduce volatile latencies, through subgraphs to make it easier to index data, through not just the fact that we don't rate limit nodes or the affordability component. I mean, all these things come together to create, they're not as user-facing as some things like, that you would traditionally work with, but these things are incredibly important in terms of making infrastructure accessible, making it easy to use, and making it flexible. And this is kind of really what we focus on, and what we believe will kind of unlock the potential of the industry and make it easier for people to build, and just kind of and FAFO. I mean, that's kind of the biggest thing. It'll make it easier for people to FAFO and create different things, and that's kind of the main message here. But pretty interesting conversation today, guys. I guess to quickly recap, we talked about a lot of different topics. We talked about gaming in the beginning, and where the next bull run will go, and financial institutions and how they all fit into Web3, and like why they're coming into Web3 now, and like maybe what are the motivations behind that. All these different things. We also talked about Worldcoin and all these different things that they've been doing, and practical applications of Web3, and kind of the future of where everything's going in terms of integrating with traditional and existing systems. And of course, we also talked about RPC node performance. So, the importance of infrastructure, the importance of RPC nodes, the importance of good infrastructure, whether it's RPCs or subgraphs or IPFS or whatever else it may be, and doing this in a way that works for you, doing this in a way that's like low latency and performant, and then writing your application around optimizing for that. So, very diverse set of topics today, but that was episode 7 of FAFO and Chill. We publish these every week, every Friday. We talk about a variety of topics. If there's a specific topic that you like to hear about, of course, these are public on YouTube. Go to our YouTube and check it out there. If you'd also like to check out the video that we mentioned today about multi-threading with Web3.py, it's a super interesting topic. You can do it, of course, only with a Chainstack node because we don't rate limit or anything, and it's a very easy way to do it with low latency as well, which you can go get at chainstack.com and view the video on how to do it on the same YouTube channel on the bite-sized building playlist found on the Chainstack YouTube channel.